Division. With our staff today, we have Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Marisa Egbert, Tom Cox, who's online, Ani Baynard, Ben Merritt, Ethan Stayner, Bradley Caldwell. We also have Stephanie McGinnis, Rebecca Free, Scott McGettigan, Richard Salas, Eric Dixon, and Isabel Melmer. And then we also have some guests with us today from the Deputy Commissioner, the Deputy Water Agent, Edward Mueller, and then Sarah Schechter, Josie Lipton, and Ellie Angelo from the AG's office. Oh, we also have Jessica Chen and Shawnee. And then with us taking minutes is Shannon Clow and our AV team, Carmen McDonald and Seth Majors. Geez, I'll get them right. Thank you.
As you can see, we just have a couple with us, but it's impossible to do all this without them. We appreciate them so very much. I will note that we are excusing Spencer Jones and Juliet Tennert from today's meetings. They will not be with us. So moving to discussion of board agenda items.
Can I welcome new staff real quick?
Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome new staff.
Great.
We got going on staff, and I forgot to welcome the new staff.
Yes, thank you. First, we'll have Stephanie McGinnis and Becca Free come up. And Steph, do you want to introduce Becca to the board?
Yeah, thank you, Candace. I feel like I was just up here last time around, it feels like, just introducing myself as a new staff member. And I would like to welcome Becca Free. She is new. She is the State Water Planning Specialist, which is a new position within the new section. So I'm really excited to have her. She's got a really great, extensive background, and I think will be a real asset to our program. And I'll hand it over and let her tell you a bit about herself.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Becca Free. I have a background in watershed science, so I have a PhD from the University of Alberta in land and water resources. And then after my PhD for a couple of years, I worked as a watershed scientist on various projects, some up in the Arctic, in Arctic Alaska, and others throughout the US and Canada. And I'm really excited to be here with the division and to work on the state water plan.
Glad to have you here.
Thanks. Any questions for Becca? Okay. No. Sounds good. You're good, Becca. Thanks. Scott and Richard?
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Scott McGettigan. I am the manager of the water optimization section at the Division of Water Resources. And so I'm just here to introduce Richard Salas. He's a new employee that has joined us back actually in December, so it's been a little while. We maybe I should have done this sooner, but nonetheless, we're glad to have Richard with us. He joins us from, he's been working in the private sector for some time and even has a military background, but he'll be working on several projects for us. Our section focuses a lot on Colorado River matters and also with ag water optimization and the ASO also, which you'll be hearing about later in the actual meeting. So I'll let Richard tell you a little bit more about himself.
Thanks, Scott. Hey, morning, everybody. Richard Salas. Happy to be here. As Scott mentioned, started off my career as a military intelligence analyst working at the National Security Agency for about 7 years. Transitioned into earning an environmental engineering degree from Colorado State, where I did consulting, a lot of hydrology and hydraulics analysis, construction and design of mining infrastructure, solid waste landfills, a little bit of everything. And then, as Scott mentioned, recently joined the division back in December and excited to be here.
Great, we're good. Glad to have you. Are there any questions for Richard?
Thanks.
Welcome.
Okay, and last but not least, we'll have Eric Dixon come up with Isabel.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Eric Dixon, the manager for the design and construction section. Happy to introduce Isabel Melmer. She's been with us just barely over 3 months. She came here from Montana, and before I mess up too much about anything, I'll just let her introduce herself. She is an engineer, too, with our design and construction group, and she's jumped full feet into all the things we've assigned her and she's doing awesome. So I'll let her talk a little bit more about herself.
Hello. I recently graduated from Montana State University with an environmental engineering degree just a few years ago. I worked in the private sector working on hydraulics and hydrology projects for about a year, and then I just moved to Utah. And so now I work in the design and construction group and work on some dam safety projects and working in Civil 3D. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Are there any questions for her? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think that is everybody there. So now we'll go to the board agenda items. So, first one, Ethan, if you want to. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped. First of all, we have minutes. Are there any, if you looked at them, are there any corrections or edits that you feel we may need?
I looked at them. I didn't have any. I'd be happy to make a motion.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Board Member Ibsen. Next we have the snow report that we'll be looking at, so not really anything to go over on that yet. Going into the projects, first project we'll be looking at RE 495, and Tim's not here, it's in his area, but Ethan, can you kind of briefly go over the project and let us know what we'll be looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. This one is for Co-op Farm Irrigation Company. This one will be coming from the revolving construction fund. The total project cost for co-op is $1,994,000. And this project is combined with the next one that Brad will be presenting, which is Huntsville South Bench Canal Company. And so the purpose of this project is to pressurize the existing system by replacing aging concrete pipes and open canal with about 18,400 feet of HDPE pipe and installing a new diversion structure. And so the location, this is in Huntsville. It's 4 miles east of Huntsville in Weber County. To touch real quick on some of the benefits, it'll eliminate the risk of having open canal near residential areas and kind of eliminate some of the losses they experience from seepage and evaporation, and just kind of replace some of their aging infrastructure, which is about 50 years old. Looking at the cost estimate in the report, it's a little different than our normal ones. So the first table is the costs that just co-op is responsible for. And then table 2 is the costs that are shared between co-op and Huntsville South Bench. And of those, co-op is covering 70%. And so combining those two with the engineering, legal, admin, and permits and fees gets to that number of $1,994,000 that co-op will be responsible for. Going to the cost sharing of that, they've got quite a number of grants that are helping them out and contributing to the project. So the Board of Water Resources cost share on this one would only be 17.5%, which comes to $348,000. And so yeah, the staff recommendation will be that the board authorize 17.5% of the project cost up to $348,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $23,200. So yeah, any questions on that? Or
Go ahead, William.
So, Ethan, I have a completely unrelated question if you're open for one.
Yeah, sure.
So it mentions the monastery. Is that monastery still in operation? Do you have any idea?
No, it actually got bought by somebody, and I think they're using it as some sort of water conservation something. I'm not exactly sure, but somebody bought that.
The reason I ask is, so when I was a kid, our folks used to take us up to the monastery, and they had a little retail outlet, and they were beekeepers.
Yeah, they keep honey.
Yeah, and then they would sell their honey, and they made creamed honey, and then they would flavor it. So you could get like raspberry creamed honey, cinnamon. There were other ones. It was called Trappist honey. So anyway, I just started thinking about whether or not I could take my kids up there to get some honey.
Maybe I wish they still were in operation. I don't know.
Okay. Sorry.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, I digress. I apologize.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Ethan, it on your cost-sharing table,
Yeah.
where it breaks down the different grants, the UDAF grant 2025 is pending. What is the status of that, and what happens if they do not get it? And where do things go from there is the thing that, looking at that table, triggered my thought process.
Great question. They are waiting. I think they said June. They said June is when they're going to hear back on that grant. If they don't get it, that 434 and change, they're going to come to us. They're going to come to the board for. That would be their plan.
Ethan, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the water that this project conveys? Is it agriculture and residential, both?
Yeah, it's mostly agricultural, but they do have a small residential area that they supply. I think 12 connections, 12 secondary connections.
12 connections.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then there's 41 agricultural shareholders.
Okay.
Um,
When, and I don't want to muddy the waters here, so to speak, but when we look at projects like this, do we ever have a requirement, because it serves residential, for them to then meter the residential components or potentially the future residential components of it? The agriculture, I understand, takes care of that, but when you're changing from a flood irrigation to a pressurized system, it's,
yeah.
I know we've done that in the Heber Valley.
I'm not sure on the requirement part, but they are going to be metering all the new connections.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, there is a statute requirement that requires all pressurized systems to meter.
And I knew that, but I didn't know because of the number of connections if it,
No, it's all connections.
that it's all connections.
Mhm.
Okay. It used
For
to be
pressurized systems.
some limit under or something that was exempt or something, but not anymore. Okay.
Yeah, it does require all systems.
Okay. Any more questions? Oh, Risa.
And now I'll go ahead and muddy up the waters just a little bit more.
I love it.
So these smaller systems could file for exemption on the metering. It's a not co-op question. Correct? As long as they're exempt. That may be for another day.
Okay.
Yeah. They
and
are metering though.
Is that per the state statute? My question is, because we are loaning money, can we have conditions to that effect for the purpose of the loan, not disregarding state statute, but
Yeah.
in addition to state statute? I'm not saying we do,
Right.
should, or not, because apparently they're going to, but I'm just asking the question.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, as we've talked at previous board meetings, we are in the process of updating the board's rules, and we've talked about increased conservation, and that is definitely one that you could have as part of your board guidelines
Perfect.
to require.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, if I can go back to the monastery.
I would love it.
I've also been at the monastery, and it was really cool. Is it Bill White?
Yeah.
Bill White is the vice president
Yeah.
of co-op. He purchased the monastery, he and his wife. It was actually in the news. They have turned it into a conservation easement. so it will never be developed. And then we found out at the meeting, Tim Hawks brought it up. Bill White was not there. And Bill White owns about 80% of the shares in Co-op. He was not there, but Tim Hawks, the board member, was there and talked about he had heard something about Huntsville leasing water for Great Salt Lake. So it is not Co-op Irrigation's water rights, but it sounds like Bill White has water rights separate for the monastery, and there might be something going on there. But that has nothing to do with this project. So hope that helps. It's really cool. It's going to be kept as a conservation easement. So.
It'd be better if they had bees.
You could talk to Bill. Hopefully, maybe he's here today. They do already have some really big circle pivots going on up there now. So.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
That's a good question. I think maybe shall we have somebody in line if he doesn't come? Can you do that, Wayne? Thank you. Okay, moving on. Next project, 496. And this one's in Tim's area as well. And Brad, do you want to come up and enlighten us as to what this project is doing, please?
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Chair and the board. So Huntsville South Bench Canal Company is in partnership with Co-op Farm Irrigation Company, and they are proposing to pressurize its aging irrigation system. The project includes replacing approximately 18,400 feet of deteriorated concrete lined canal, and about only 2,500 of that is Huntsville South Bench's pipeline or open canal. So Huntsville South Bench will be paying for 30% of Co-op irrigation's costs for conveyance of water, and they'll be replacing that with HDPE pipe, and they will also be constructing a new diversion structure. These improvements will enhance water efficiency, lower operational costs, and extend service to previously unserviced acres, and that's about 5 acres. The project is backed by multiple funding sources, including grants from the Bureau of Reclamation and the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. And that is staff's report. Any questions?
I have a question.
Any questions, Dana?
Same thing with the UDAF grant that's pending. Will they come back to us for
Correct.
additional funding if it's not granted?
Yes, correct.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Again, Board Member Hawks, we don't know the status of his being there, so Board Member Merkley, if you'll make that motion, if he's not here, please. Okay, yes. Marisa.
Sorry, it sounds like maybe
You
it's
should just sit up here.
no. It sounds like it's not been confusing, but this whole thing started because the two companies jointly were awarded a grant, a WEEG grant. And so that's how this started. They worked together to get that. So they're splitting that grant. But when they came to us separately for our funding with the two different applications. So that's where and on top of that, the reason they're cost sharing a portion of the project is because it's the upper portion, the diversion structure and a long pipeline before they split. And so since they both benefit from that, they're cost sharing on that portion. So
do both entities then have water rights that go through the system?
yes.
Okay, so we will encumber those rights.
Separately, they're going to have separate agreements. That's why they have separate reports and yeah. And
Well, I meant for the cost share portion, it's two different companies.
yeah. So sorry. So maybe ask your question again then.
Well, do both their cost sharing on this
Yeah.
section on 496? Do they both have water rights that we're going to
Go through the project.
hold that we will, for the
Yes.
purpose of the project?
Yep. For each agreement, we will hold water rights for each entity.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's it on that one. Okay, Ani, go.
So, RE 497 is for Powder Mountain Water and Sewer Improvement District. I'll describe their system if I can remember everything, but if you're headed up to Powder Mountain, there's a series of booster pumps. The first one, there's a spring, Pitzel Springs and Cobab Well, and they're about 100 feet from each other, and that water would be pumped from booster pump 1 to 2, and then the proposed project will be housed in booster pump 2, which is the filtration system, and then that water will be boosted up to booster pump 3, and then up into the Timberlake. There's Timberline tanks. There's 2 of them in the mid-mountain area, and that water can be gravity fed down to the west part of Powder Mountain, the older section. And then at the very top, they get boosted again, and at the very top of the system, there are 2 tanks and 2 wells, Bloomington Well and Hidden Lake Well. So right now, their system is only using the Hidden Lake Well. The lower ones at Booster Pump 1, the Cobab Well and Pitzel Springs, they've been contaminated. They have bacterial contamination, and drinking water requires them to filter the water before they can use it. So this project is going to be, there's actually two projects to this. The first is the filtration upgrade, and it includes the installation of a system to filter and treat the water from Cobab Well and Pitzel Springs. It's going to be a multimedia filter first, and then goes through 3 cartridge filters. So, and they've tested this system extensively last summer, so they're very confident that it will be a good way to treat the water. And then they're also going to expand their pump station to house the filtration system and a new generator. So the pump station 2 will just be expanded enough to fit all the equipment. And so that water, yes, that will be pumped up to the Timberline tanks and then used for the lower section of Powder Mountain. And then the next project is they're going to replace their water line. It goes from the Timberline tanks and crosses the Powder Mountain parking lot. And it tends to freeze and burst at the very worst time for a ski resort. So they're going to be replacing that with a 10-inch pipe, PVC pipe, and they're going to bury it 7 feet so they can hopefully prevent the freezing issue. And Powder Mountain is going to be contributing money to that because it affects them so much. And then there's a couple other pipelines they're going to replace with 8-inch pipe. So that's basically of this project. And so the staff recommends the board authorize 77% of the project cost up to $1,395,000, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 3.33% interest over 30 years, with annual payments of approximately $78,000, including reserves. So do you have any questions?
Dana?
What's the structure, the pump house, what's it made out of? Is it a concrete
Yeah, I think it's
situation with
yeah.
a metal roof, kind of?
Yeah, and it's got a very sloped roof, but the reason they're using Booster Pump 2 station is because it has room to expand in the back, whereas Booster Pump 1 does not. So that they're pumping it to 2, and then they'll have their new filtration system in that.
And there's no connections between 1 and 2, I'm assuming?
No.
So I'm assuming they had an engineering firm design all this.
JUB.
Okay, because I know a big component, I mean, scraping off the parking lot is one component, but the compaction of automobiles driving on it is another component of freezing pipes. So just want to make sure that it is deep enough and out of that freeze
Yeah,
compaction area.
They're gonna do, they say 7 feet is a good elevation or depth to bury the pipes, but they also have these big insulation. I have a picture of the insulation, but they insulate it with this huge thing of insulation.
Okay, so
it'll be
they're
insulated as
addressing that
well.
issue then, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Another question, you mentioned that they had tested the filtration system extensively. What did you mean by that? Because I assume the new system's not in yet, so how did they
No.
test something that isn't there?
You know, you have to ask the engineers that. I did not.
Because it's not installed
Yeah, they must
yet,
have
I would assume.
tested it on some other system.
Okay.
No, it's not installed. It's not installed yet.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Ani.
Mr. Chair, I would just note that JUB will be here, so they
Okay.
can help answer some of those engineering
Okay.
questions.
On this one as well, if Board Member Hawks is not in attendance, we will need someone to. Thank you, Board Member Van Horn. Okay, moving on to RL 591, Hurricane City. This one, Spencer Jones is not here either, Board Member Jones, so Ethan, it's all on you to help us understand.
Uh-oh. Awesome. Yeah, Hurricane City, hopefully you remember some of it from, we had this at the March board meeting in St. George, but the amount we're talking about today, so this is a special item, authorize and commit for the additional amount that they need. The amount that was committed at the March board meeting came from the City Water Loan Fund. The additional amount is coming from a different fund that will carry an interest rate, and that's the Conservation and Development Fund. So the total project cost is $37,800,000, and that includes all the pressurized irrigation and all the drinking water components. The amount, well, and real quick, yeah, so that amount, yeah, like I said, includes both. The amount that was committed at the last board meeting covers all the PI, covers the board portion of all the PI and most of the drinking water portion. And so this amount is just a little bit left to get them over the top on the drinking water portion. And so the drinking water portion of the project includes the installation and equipping of 2 wells and constructing a 2 million gallon tank, and then the associated piping to connect that to the system. And this is in Hurricane, in the southern part of Hurricane City in Washington County. And so going to the cost estimate and sharing, that's for the drinking water portion, it's $9,277,000. And so this additional amount would be 13.8% of that at $1,282,000. And so the staff recommendation on this additional amount is that the staff recommends the board authorize and commit 13.8% of the project cost up to $1,282,000, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 3.33% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $81,000. And so, yeah, are there any questions on this one?
I just want to note that Board Member Brian Steed has joined us. And I don't know if you feel the warmth and gratitude for you being here, but we now have a quorum, so thank you. Thank you for being here.
I do feel that. Thanks so much. Sorry for being late.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just had a question. The way you just explained it, up to 13.3%, that's not in what the recommendation is, your actual recommendation reads
Oh.
differently than what you just said?
Yes.
Yeah.
The motion in your report is correct. So, thank you. It's what will be on the slide in front of you, authorizing and committing an additional $1,282,000 from the C&D fund, and then the rest. Thank you.
Different fund than what their
Yes.
thing was last board meeting.
Right. Thanks.
And it's sounds like just due to additional costs, that construction costs and things like that.
Yeah.
That have come
Yeah.
up.
Any further questions?
I have a question.
Board Member Van Horn.
What's the interest rate they're paying on the city's water loan?
0.
Okay. And that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So
Yep,
that's why
we'll
they're
talk
not
about that
getting
during the status
more-
of funds.
More zero. Okay.
Yep, no more 0.
And
Okay.
do we have information, or is it not time yet for information on their average water bill? Or is it?
It was included in the feasibility that they are over the affordability
Okay.
guideline that we have. That's why they got 0% from their city water loans fund money, is because they were over the affordability guideline already. But for the recommendations from the C&D fund, this is the municipal interest rate unless their median adjusted gross income is, smaller than the statewide average, which it's not. So they don't qualify for a reduction in that municipal rate, which is currently 3.33%. So that's why we have that recommendation
Okay.
for the C&D funding.
Any further questions? Thank you
Thanks.
both for getting us through that. This one, because Board Member Jones is not here, we will need someone to make the motion. Thank you, Board Member Gibson. Okay, moving on, RE 494, Washington County Water Conservancy District. Is Tom, he's joined us?
Mr. Chair, Tom Cox, I believe, is online. We typically don't go through new applications,
Okay.
but I did think it would be good for him to give an overview on this one, just because it is slightly different in the sense.
Okay, let us know what's different.
Yes, you can say that it's a little different. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I need to apologize for not being there in person, but it just didn't work out today. But Washington County Water Conservancy District did submit an application, just a small one. Total project cost was $915 million. And that possibly could go up. We're in discussions on what items should and should not be included in that project. And it's anticipated it'll cover 15 years or so. So we're still working on what would be appropriate in being included in this and not. So the project is to take their wastewater and reuse it for irrigation, and ultimately 15, 20 years in the future could be used for actual culinary water use. So the project would include additional storage, pipelines, and better water treatment to make it usable for culinary purposes when that time comes. So that's the project in a nutshell, and stand by for the board meeting next month because we'll have it ready to present then.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Any questions pertaining to this potential project? Yes. Oh, Board Member Van Horn has lots. Actually, I have a couple too.
Well, and they might be more for Shalene. I don't know. So they want $915 million for this project from us, or, okay, so the total.
That's the total project cost. The funding from water resources will come from the WIFA fund, water infrastructure, and I can't remember the rest of it.
WIRA, yeah. But it says they approved $195 million to be transferred, $50 million a year for 4 years. So they're gonna get that through this application. Presumably, in other words, they're not taking any additional money out of the C&D fund for this. It's 100% WIRA transfer funding.
At this point, yes, we have offered. What I anticipate it'll be in phases, and we'll take care of chunks of the funding per phase. So if come 10 years from now, if they need additional funding, and there's money available in the C&D fund and through the new process that's being set up in funding water projects, there's a possibility that more funding could come from water resources, but that's down the road a ways. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I might add to that,
Yes.
In my discussions with the general manager of Washington County Water Conservancy District, Zach Renstrom, he would appreciate any amount of funds that the state can provide as a loan. So I would not surprise me if they came back for more, and potentially that the legislature transfer more money. That's another potential as well. To be honest, I'm not sure why the legislature made that choice. They could have just authorized the board to use the WIRA funds for this purpose and give the board authorization to do that, but they chose to transfer it to the C&D. So we'll kind of keep that in mind as we go forward too.
Okay.
With the being in the C&D fund, they meet the same interest requirements that benefits the C&D fund, or does that go, or is the interest earned on any money that we get kept with the WIRA money? If this is too weird for this setting, I can ask later.
No, this is perfect. Go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, I was instructed to treat this as much as we can as a regular funding project. So yes, it will still we'll have the interest. We'll look at the board guidelines as far as repayments go, and all the big deal as much as we can. So
good.
Yes, my understanding is that because they did transfer it to the C&D fund, that's repayments will credit back to the C&D, help that continue to grow. And if there are additional funds that are needed and the board has them available, we could provide them from the regular C&D funds. These just have a little extra criteria that, they're only for specific purposes. But I think by transferring it to the C&D, we are looking at it as we're treating these like regular C&D funds as long as it meets the criteria spelled out in the legislature's intent language.
So I think there's other places intending projects like this one for reuse since this law went through. So I think it's nice to have it just be the same process instead of having to do something special like with the ARPA money. It's nice that it's just
stick with things as similar as possible. Yes, we like that too.
Thank you, Shalane.
Board Member Steed, yes, please.
Mostly just a comment, but a cautionary note. I do think that we will have legislative oversight over how this money is allocated, just based on the number of restrictions they put on it. 1, 2, I also think that we can't count on this necessarily coming back to us if there are further legislative actions. I think it's a very different category of money, and we just got to be mindful of that on planning for the future.
Is it something we would have to maybe address in our systems? I mean, we won't know until something's done, but I'm guessing we may have to address something to see if there is an interest that has to filter through us and go back to the state or something to that effect.
where it was transferred to the C&D, I agree with Shalane that we're anticipating or treating this like a regular board project. That being said, there could be a decision later that the legislature says we're going to pull this money back and put it into the WIRA potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens.
Tom, I have a question. My mind always goes in the weeds, and I apologize up front. The issue of water rights on something like this, I don't know how many reuse projects have even been attempted in the state, but I know that's been a big discussion of who are the water rights of the initial holder forfeited as it goes through a municipality. Does the municipality then get granted a water right to do that, or is it just a reuse of the first right? Is any of that been kind of outlined? This is a big project, so this one's more substantial than anything I've heard of.
Yeah, that's to be determined, and the district is working through those things. So I wouldn't be comfortable in saying at this point, but I think they're working out the rules determining, or that will determine the use of reuse water. So there will be environmental issues I need to take care of, because water that's released from the St. George treatment facility will not be released anymore. It'll be reused. So that's taking water out of the system. Where on the other hand, they're building Ash Creek Special Service District is building a new treatment plant, whereas now they just have lagoons, which is 100% depletion. So they will be putting water into the system. So it'll be a balancing act within that'll all need to be taken care of. There are federal monies involved, so there will be environmental assessments or EISs done. So there's a lot of paperwork that'll need to be taken care of before I guess the water can actually be used. So.
Okay, I know there's a lot of people looking at this, asking these same questions, and so I'm just interested. Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Shalane.
If I could make one comment, I do believe all the water rights that will be involved will be the district's water rights. They will start and end with Washington County Water Conservancy District. So I don't think we need to worry about other individual rights being affected. You had mentioned that at the beginning of your question about the primary holder. I believe the primary holder for all the rights involved in this project will be Washington County's.
So they provide the water, they provide the sewer, so
yes,
it's their system.
That's my understanding.
And that's different than some of the others across the state, where you have different water providers versus sewer, wastewater treatment providers, and so forth. Okay.
That's my understanding.
Thank you. Any other questions?
This doesn't require a motion, right? It's just FYI.
No. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Shalane. Let's see. Next, we'll have a report from Scott McGettigan on the airborne snow observation report, so we'll look forward to that. And then director's report from Director Hassenjager. And that basically covers everything for today. Are there any questions on any of the things that will be on the agenda for this regular meeting? Anything from you?
We just have a few items of information to the board when you're ready to go to.
I think we're at that point now.
Okay, sounds great. Shalane, do you want to go over our status of funds, please?
That's why I didn't leave. I figured I'd jump into that today and explain a couple things that might look a little different than usual. So as you can see, two of the feasibilities that will be those first two presented today, Co-op and Huntsville, are both coming from the revolving fund. So they're not large at this point. Maybe by committal, if they don't get those UDAF grants, they could be more significant, but we do still have even if everything currently authorized and committed gets funded, we still have about 14 million left in the revolving fund for regular projects. I am not going to cover dam safety much today. You can see the information here, but when I'm finished, I'm going to ask Tom to chat with you. He sent us a new projection of proposed projects coming up for dam safety funding. So I printed those out so I can give them to you, and he can discuss that with you, as well as have Ben talk a little bit about the FEMA grant funding that the state received. So for now, we'll move on. The next page is the city's water loan fund, which, as we said, no longer exists. It was repealed effective May 7th. So what I've shown is that we funded those last projects, Heber City and Hurricane, in the last fiscal year, and had a balance remaining of just over $3 million that was transferred to the Water Infrastructure Fund and will be used in the new Unified Water Infrastructure Plan as the boards move forward. Divisions of drinking water, water resources, and water quality all figure out this new process from legislation last year. This funding will go to help fund that, and any existing projects still receiving repayments, those repayments will also go into that new Water Infrastructure Fund. So city water loans is just gone.
Are all these 0%? The three?
They were.
Okay.
Those funded this last year, I believe they were. So yeah, not significant earnings anyway. The C&D fund, of course, is where we have the most money and do the biggest projects. But if you will note that I did separate out this time the Colorado River reuse funds from the regular C&D. So currently, there have been 2 transfers. There are $95 million available for those projects at this point. The remaining balance, if we go back to the beginning of the fiscal year, would have been about $156 million available. You can see we've contracted almost 40, committed another little less than 14 committed. Then we've got authorized. The balance, if everything is funded, is just under $75 million for regular C&D projects. So there's nothing contracted, nothing committed in the Colorado River reuse funds, but I wanted to separate this out so you could see. It's there. Those transfers will happen once a year, is our understanding at the beginning of the fiscal year. And now we do have that new application. So when it's time to present it to you, that $95 million won't go very far versus a $200 million application. But we wanted you to have that separated out now. Nothing on the other pages has changed. The small system secondary grants have been overcommitted, as we've discussed before. That funding comes in just once a year, but has to be spent or it lapses at the end of a fiscal year. So we overcommit a little bit so that we can try to not lose money since these projects are taking time, and ARPA's contracted. We're moving right along. You will start to see some projects being closed out, withdrawn. We may actually start to have a balance remaining. We've been informed that the governor's office needs to be involved if any ARPA funds come back, that they want to say in any reallocation, because there are certain restrictions, but we will keep you informed. And so then on the additional future funding needs, you can see we've added that Washington County project, needing approximately $200 million from the board for their $915 million project. That is my status of funds. Are there any questions?
Any questions on status of funds?
I'm just curious if when those people when the entities that have loans from C&D, where do they pay that money back to?
So repayments are all of our loans are officially handled by the Division of Finance, the state's Division of Finance. So they send out invoices, notices to pay. All the payments go to the Division of Finance, and then they're credited back to the appropriate fund. So we have a fund number for our C&D fund. It's a specific account number. Any repayments that come back go into that fund.
Well, I was thinking about the city's water loan one. So
Oh, the city's water loans. Those will, yep, when the bill passed that repealed the city's water loan fund, it did say repayments for those existing projects would go back to the water infrastructure fund. So.
until they're paid back, it's probably on us to keep track of them, making sure that they're paying them, or is that?
It's finance's job. They do typically notify us, and I'll be honest, Candace, I don't really know who has authority over the WIF. I'm assuming it's the Water Development Coordinating Council, and Candace is chair, so I imagine we'll be notified if payments are late or not made, or simply just notified of what payments are received. I get a spreadsheet every year, every fiscal year, showing what repayments came in, what was interest, what was principal, and have to track that with our accounting office, our financial manager, to make sure we've got the same information that the Division of Finance has. So I imagine that's how we'll be notified of WIF if there are issues with repayments to the WIF. And I do know it is, Finance has already been proactive with us about making these changes, changing account numbers and things, to make sure things are credited properly. And so, yeah, it should be fun.
Any further questions? Thank you,
Okay,
Shalane.
thank you. So I will bring you this handout. Tom, if you want to start chatting, I'll get these to the board.
Great. So we'll give you about 10 seconds to look it over, and then I'll start talking.
Thank you.
I think most of you board members are pretty much aware of the dam safety grant program to bring high hazard dams in the state up to meet state minimum dam safety standards. So the legislature has appropriated 3.8 million ongoing per year to go towards those projects, which was great about 10 years ago, but now a single project on average costs more than 3.8 million. So to kind of rectify that, the legislature has appropriated one-time funds several times, including the latest, which was a $25 million appropriation for fiscal that we received in fiscal year 24. So the paper that you're looking at are spending projections beginning the fourth quarter of fiscal year 25, which we're in now, and which ends the end of June. So in the approximate balance, and I'm starting up in the kind of the upper left-hand corner of your paper, that the approximate balance of the 25 million one-time funds is 12.9 million. The approximate balance of the ongoing $3.8 million funds is 9.6 million. And just a comment, I guess, about the nature of dam safety programs. The statute for governing the dam safety funding says that when the state has enough money to fund a project, the dam owner will be contacted and instructed to hire an engineer and proceed with the design and engineering to upgrade their dam to meet minimum standards and then to proceed with construction. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the system here. So these projections are just a shot in the dark of where the funding will go. And it typically takes a year or so to design a project, and then a year or two to construct a project. So when we look at these things, it's kind of up in the air as far as how fast they will proceed. So we do our best in these projections. And if you look at the starting at the top, the first 5 are projects that are currently under construction or nearing completion or have been completed, and we're just working through the final numbers. So the different columns show, the first one shows the amount of grant that's been contracted to the dam owners from Water Resources. The next column is the estimated balance remaining under that contract. Then the next 2 columns are where we are projecting those funds will come from, whether it's coming from ongoing funding or one-time funding, those 2 different pots. And then the final 2 columns are the balances in the ongoing funding and the one-time funding. So if you kind of skim down, we have enough funds to cover the cost estimates of those projects down through the summer of 2026. Then we hit Joe's Valley Reservoir, which is a large reservoir in Emery County. It used to be owned by the federal government, but the title was turned over to the Emery County Water Conservancy District, as well as the Huntington North Dam. And those both need upgrade, and Joe's Valley is a large project. It's the board's cost share on that one will be $24 million. So that will take pretty much all of the funding at that point, unless the legislature appropriates another one-time funding. If you look at some of the dams, the names some of them have NRCS next to them. Those are dams that are receiving grant funding from the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, for upgrade, and they will cover about 65% of the construction costs, but they will need state funding to help cover the remaining 35%, the local cost share. So I guess that's the funding in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Tom? This is an interesting sheet. Thank you for doing this. I think it shows a lot. Thanks, Tom.
I do it. We try to upgrade it once a quarter. So come the new fiscal year, we'll have hopefully better numbers. We're looking at the 5 that are under construction. I think most of them will be finished by then, and hopefully the books will be closed, so they'll drop out and others will take their place. So I know Kolob Dam down in Washington County is really the only new one that will be under construction this fall. They have to replace a spillway, which this Division of Water Rights, their dam safety office has worked with them and they have an agreement that they will replace their spillway this year. because it pretty much failed last year and they cannot operate another season without an operating spillway. And some of those projects, and Ben will talk about that next, we were granted some federal grant money for design work. And there are, I think, 3 line items on the sheet that show just payments towards that. That's not the federal grant money. That would be the state cost share to help cover the local cost share of the designs on those. So all of the federal funding is up in the air right now. So there's a lot of dams. I think there's 8 or 9 of the NRCS ones that are shown. And there may not be any funding for construction. So if that happens, then those will be put down lower on the list, and the non-NRCS or federal funded projects will rise up towards the top.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. Ben's gonna give us an update on the high hazard dam and FEMA money.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm coming before you guys today, I guess, to request both your assistance and your counsel on the next steps with this federal grant funding. So as most of you remember, back in December, I gave a presentation talking about this FEMA money that we've been pursuing to supplement our state dam safety grant fund. We've run into a little bit of a hiccup recently. We became aware of some federal requirements that we weren't aware of before. The situation is such that some of these dam owners are registered as 501c12 nonprofits, and as such, they need a government sponsor in order to pursue their project further. And so at this point in time, what I anticipate doing is putting together a coalition of representatives from both the state and the dam owners to approach these counties to request that the counties come on as partners to the projects. And what that essentially is going to mean for the county is that they are going to have to agree contractually, they're going to have to contractually agree to be financially responsible for the project, and also to be responsible for operation and maintenance of the dam for the 50 years preceding a construction project, which is no small task, which is why I'm here asking for your help. So I have 3 dams, 3 dams in 3 different counties, which we're going to need to approach. So the first one is Birch Creek number 2, which is in Rich County, and that is in the Bear River District, which currently does not have a board member representative. So probably Chairman Davis will probably lean on you for that particular project. The next one is Rolfson and San Pete, and that'll be more board member Ibsen. And then the third one will be White Pine, which is in Salt Lake County, which is board member Tenert's district. So these 3 projects, I anticipate putting together a coalition, like I mentioned, probably with myself, Tom Cox, and Ethan Stayner, and then the respective board member, probably Matt Call from the dam safety section down in water rights, because he's the assistant state engineer over dam safety. It'll be the dam owner and also probably the design engineer for that particular project. And we'll approach the county, and this is where I'm asking for your counsel. I probably will speak later, but what's the best way to approach these counties, maybe even who to contact. And then we'll need to approach them, explain the situation, explain that we need their help getting this grant funding into their county, and hopefully get them to agree to become a partner on these projects. If they don't, our only other option is to approach a special service district that that might have jurisdiction over the dam. I don't know that there are any, quite frankly, for these dams. I didn't look into that. But aside from that, these particular projects were lucky to be already registered as a 501c12. We unfortunately have lost multiple projects due to ineligibility because they were not registered with the IRS as a nonprofit company. Yeah, we got $7.3 million as the grant, but at this point we've lost several projects, and so yeah, that's kind of my update at this point. We'll be speaking more, I hope. I'll need your assistance pursuing these three, and yeah, I guess that's my most recent update. Board Member Merkley and Board Member Hawks, you might, if you're interested in finding more information, you can go back and watch the December board meeting. I gave a presentation talking about the process we've been through to pursue these funds. But yeah, are there any questions on that?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple questions. Could you back up, Ben, just a little bit? And there were a couple things that piqued my interest, specifically where Rolfson is going to be involved in it. The county, I'm sitting here listening, and as I understood you talking, the county, they would have to agree to take over maintenance and that type of things for the next 50 years.
Correct.
What incentive, in my mind, I'm asking myself, what incentive is there for the county wanting to take over responsibility to maintain and be responsible, liable, all of that, for a dam that they don't own the water rights to and they don't have and all that? So in my mind, it's rumbling around up there. What incentive is there for the county? To counter that, what incentive is there for the amount of money we're talking here for the owners of the dam to give their stewardship? They're the ones who own the dam, that have the dog in the fight, so to speak, or the ownership. What incentive is there to incentivize them to give away the maintenance and that type of thing in the dam? So in my mind, I'm struggling with what is there to incentivize either side to go forth with something like this.
I think we have a few things. The first, as far as the dam owner is concerned, they're incentivized by the prospect of having their dam upgraded essentially for free. Each of these projects are likely to turn into multi-million-dollar projects, which they probably would not have the capacity to fund themselves. And so the incentive for the dam owners is essentially financial. Okay. Beyond that, their dams will decay to a point where they'll be under fill restrictions, and so at some point they have to pursue a project, and that's just a matter of not if but when. As far as the county goes, I think you're right. It's a big ask to ask them to take on the operation maintenance and also to ask them to take on financial responsibility. That's a huge ask, which is why I'm hoping to put together a coalition to approach each of these counties. But the main things that I think that we'll be able to get, the main reasons we'll be able to get them to help us, I think, is because one, they have, as the local governments, they have a responsibility to their citizens to ensure their safety. And these dams are high hazard dams, which means that if they fail, they will kill people. And so they essentially have responsibility for these dams. Even if they don't assume that now, if the dam were to fail, it would be on the county, upon their emergency personnel. It'd be a huge disaster. They have an impetus to participate in that regard. They're directly responsible for the safety of their citizens. And the second reason I think that we can get them to participate is because they also have, as a local government, a responsibility to facilitate economic growth in their area, which these dams are
that's what they do. This water is primarily used for irrigation and the growth of crops. And so, I mean, also, you know, flood protection in many cases. So I think those two reasons, I think we have a pretty strong argument to make that they have a responsibility to take on, these projects.
So
if I could jump in just for a minute, I think we'd have to look at the requirements a little bit more closely, but I would guess that there could be a service agreement between the dam owner and the county, and so that it would basically be business as usual, but the dam owner, the company would still collect assessments to maintain the dam. Those funds could be either passed on to the county and they can do the work, or the agreement could say that the dam owner would still do the maintenance, but it would be the county to I guess they'd have to take responsibility and make sure that work's being done, but that would be the only cost to the county, is just that extra little step, just overseeing that the work is actually being done.
That's right. We're not actually asking them to do the operation and maintenance or to do the project, so to speak. They will simply have a hand in making sure the operation and maintenance is being done, and they will, legally be responsible as part of an MOU that they'll have to enter into for that.
And if I could add to Blaine's questions and concerns, Ben and I were talking this morning about this, and I think Panguitch Lake Dam and the situation that happened last year is a prime example of why the county might be convinced to have an interest. Panguitch Lake is owned and operated by West Panguitch Irrigation and Reservoir Company. But when it began to leak, there was concern of failure. It was the county. It was the county responsible to respond and keep their people safe. It was the county that got first responders up to the dam to do excavation, to make any changes they could to stop this dam from failing, because it was not the irrigation company that was at huge risk. It was the county had their residents at risk that they wanted to protect, and they're the ones that had an emergency action plan in place, were preparing for evacuation. So I think it's an example that can be used of why it's in their best interest. I also think Panguitch is a good example because had the county been in an agreement or even overseeing some of the operation and maintenance, there is concern that it was some of that operation and maintenance that led to the overfilling of the reservoir that might have caused some of the issues last year. If the county might have been actively observing how things were being run. Now there are things in place, going into place for the Panguitch project, so hopefully that won't happen again. But I do think that is an argument that can be made for counties that, this does concern you. You do want the high hazard dams in your county to meet minimum standards. And while you may not own the dam, you have a vested interest in its safety.
Along with that, though, help me understand these three dams. Ralston, I'm personally concerned about right now, where that's my area. Are they on the state's list for minimum standards where they'll get the 80-90% grant anyway as their time comes through? And if that's the case, then having it 100% funded isn't. It's going to be 90% funded anyway. And is it worth going through the other would be a question. If I'm a dam owner, I'm going to be asking too. And so West Panguitch is a great example, but that was not under the minimum standard time frame. That was a kind of a different class, if you will, than if these are right now queued up in line type thing. So there is a differentiation on, are they in the queue waiting for minimum standards where they get the 80-90% grant, type thing. So there is a bit of a differentiation in my mind in that sense.
Yeah, you're right. They're on the list currently. The difference, I guess, is that with this federal funding, we're allowed to fund projects now that may not have been up for funding.
That might be 5 or 10 years down the road type thing, yes.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, I think generally, as you can see by the information Tom put together, is we have a huge deficit in our ability to cover these high hazard dams, and we've projected out, what is it, Tom, like 100 years at our current funding rate to try to get through this list once, not to mention what happens when you have a situation like Panguitch that went through the minimum dam safety and then still had a situation. So I think there's an overall need to get additional funds. We are pursuing building block requests annually, I think, for as long as I've been at Water Resources. And I think this was our effort to see, well, the state has this much, let's see what we can get from the federal government because they had additional funds. And I know Brian had
Board Member Steed.
Sorry, Tom, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you want to answer, and then I'll ask my question?
There is a financial advantage to both the state and the dam owners to pursue this money, even though they have to jump through the federal hoops. Because if a state, let's say there is $1 million upgrade project, the state would provide 80 or 90% in grant, depending on who owns it. If it's a governmental entity, it'd be 80%. If it's a private company, it'd be 90%. But with the federal funding, they would provide 65% of whatever they're going to do, and then the state would still provide the 80 or 90% of whatever is left. So the state has to come up with fewer dollars, as well as the dam owner would have to come up with fewer dollars if they went with the federal money. And yeah, if we don't use the federal money, the dams on the list would just fall in line on the state priority list, and they would eventually be funded. But this is a way to get them taken care of a lot quicker.
So,
Board Member Steed.
Two questions. Question number one is legalistic, so sorry. I'm curious on if anyone's done an analysis on liability, on who bears the liability, because one of the things the county might argue in getting involved is they don't want to take on that risk, and they may not have that risk right now. But in signing that MOU, they may acquire that risk, and that's something that may be a disincentive for them to participate. And that's something I think that probably merits our conversation. Just looking at how it is, and I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's worth looking at. The second question, this is maybe more advocacy than it is a question, but I'll couch it as a question. It seems to me that this is something that we know is going to be a problem going forward, and then we know that there is a huge amount of risk associated with it. How do we get our state funders as well as our federal funders to take it more seriously, given the fact that if we do have the next Panguitch leg, immediately the ask was for the state to be involved, right? Or if there is a more catastrophic event, say a Teton Dam-like incident, then it's going to be perceived very much to be the state's problem, even though right now the state is saying, yeah, we just don't have the money for it. And it seems like that may be saving money on the front end at the risk of causing catastrophe on the tail. And I'm curious on how we get people's attention better that way, and just an open question on how we can best strategize.
They're looking at me, so I'll take a stab at that, Mr. Chair. I think it is a real challenge, and we've tried, as I mentioned, for years to try to get our ongoing funds increased, at least to $10 million. What we're seeing is not only our inflation and everything, the cost of dams fixes are going up, but we're also seeing just the generally increased need of what those dam repairs look like. You know, seeing we have 24 million for Joe's Valley, which 2-3 years ago wasn't even on our dam safety list because it was a federal fund. But now the state's supposed to come in at 80% of that. So I think it is a real challenge. I would be happy to have you guys provide me any talking points or anything that I can do to better communicate what we're up against. But it is hard to, it's kind of, I think this is one of the issues with water in general, is most of the time the risk or the infrastructure's not seen, right? They see a dam, they don't know what the status is or the pipe in the ground, and so it often gets pushed to the side. Where if you have that pothole you run over every day, you're going to be calling somebody saying, I got a pothole and I need that fixed. So I think that's one of the challenges with water infrastructure.
And Mr. Chair, if I can have a follow-up, I mean, I think that's part of the problem, though. I mean, Joe's Valley being just one instance, one of the reasons Joe's Valley was interested in moving from feds to state jurisdiction, or actually feds to private jurisdiction, was to access different resources to fix problems they know they had. And if you look at that, and there's a good state interest for being concerned, right? If Joe's Valley fails, it's 8 minutes or so until the town of Orangeville, and then it's on to our main power facilities of the state, all of which that's going to be a long-term cost for us. And so, but I'm saying, trying to figure that out, I think it's helpful for, and if staff needs the board's assistance in even putting together, information or even being advocates on our own, I think it's probably worthwhile.
Mr. Chair, I would add in thinking about Ben's proposed coalition, I think getting the legislators involved in the area is also one way to try to not only educate the legislatures of issues on the ground in their area, but also the funding needs.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Ben, I was just thinking, based on some legal action that has been taken out in our county that involved the county and others, I think to Brian's comment, the very first thing that you're going to have to deal with is the liability issue. I do not see a county being willing to take on the liability for a private impoundment facility of this kind. Irrigation is not a governmental function, therefore it's not subject to immunity. If I was a county representative, if I was a commissioner, I can't speak to them, but I wouldn't accept it. It's outside of their wheelhouse, and I don't know. I worry about that.
Thank you. I'll make a comment here too. I was in local government for county for a long time, and I think the Panguitch situation is a little different, because I think in any county in our state, if there were an emergency, the county would respond. But taking on liabilities to prevent an emergency is a different issue. And local governments feel a lot of pressure from the state now, or perceived pressure, to fund things that they don't get a return on. And so I tend to agree with both Councilmember Steeds and Councilmember Merkley's comments that I think it's a tough push on the counties. I think it's worth trying, but I would be careful with our arguments. I don't know enough information about any of these dams, how many people they service. I mean, if it's a low service area, I mean, we have projects that have 20 users. County's not going to take on that liability. Thousands, maybe even hundreds. It becomes a different issue. So, and I think it's going to be important to bring to the table an analysis of the potential liability. So if it breaks, we just heard Joe's Valley, if that breaks, what happens. I don't know on these what happens if they break. Do they ruin people's fields? Do they flood homes? Do they go down a municipal street? And I think that would be good information, because that's more what the counties will deal with, is the potential damages from it Now, is there any water from these that goes into private subdivisions or used in municipal type services from any of these reservoirs, even though they're private? I don't know. I know in our county, those that were private got put into service districts for this very purpose, in that the private people could not take the liabilities, could not afford to fix the dams. And so service districts were created to distribute the costs, that the potential users would help pay for those costs. And so that we might need to look at that a little more to persuade the counties. Counties have to create the service districts. So that might be a good avenue to look at, because that does remove the county somewhat from a liability as well, creating the service district. So that might be another avenue to look at. Yes, go ahead.
Also, I mean, why does it have to be the county? I mean, could it, like, for example, we're in Grand County where we are, our Conservancy district owns the lake, but it's shared ownership with a special service district. But if they were having a similar issue and the special service district owned it, I would look to the Conservancy district, who's already in the water business and in some cases the dam business in the same county, instead of going all the way up to the counties.
And you're right. I mean,
Jordan Valley could help out Salt Lake, or one of,
Yes, and I think we'd have to look at the specific requirements and the federal definition of government entity, because, yeah, I think if there's a government entity with jurisdiction like a district, we'd like that. I think for some of them, the issue becomes maybe the only one that covers the area where the dam is the actual county. But I think it will vary from dam to dam. But I so appreciate all the input. I think it's very helpful information, and I think that's what Ben is looking for is help me be able to get through this process. And if there's things I should say, shouldn't say, are you willing to help me out? That's kind of what we're looking for today is can we get your support so we can get this funding as much as possible to stretch the board's funding to get as much as possible. And then if I might, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn just a little bit and go back to Brian's comment. I think Candace and Joel and I have been beating that drum of, and it's not just dam safety funding. I mean, this is why I say I'm happy that we changed the name of my branch of the office from development to supply resilience. And I think it covers a big thing. And one of the big things we're focused on right now is a reliable supply. And that includes upgrading dams that people may not realize they have issues, but our water supply is critical, and having a safe, reliable supply, whether that's aqueduct resilience or dam safety funding, if you would all be willing to join in beating that drum when the legislature comes time to dole out funding, it would be very helpful, I think. I've said in some of our meetings with the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, I know I sound like a broken record, but things haven't changed that much, and it's going to have to change to be able to make a significant difference. So, and I think it might be helpful to realize that ongoing funding, I think we've discussed it before, but that $3.8 million, it's a transfer from the C&D fund to the revolving fund specifically for dam safety. It's not like we're even asking for additional money or new money. So when we ask them, hey, up our ongoing to 10 million from 3.8, we're still not asking for new money. We're asking to be able to take that funding from the C&D and use it for dam safety upgrades. So your assistance in getting that motion, I mean, when we ask for one-time funds, those are new. Those are new appropriations. That's what we're asking for. But when we're asking for those increases in ongoing, it's like, just let us take a little bit more of this money and use it for dam safety, because the law is very clear that we can only use for dam safety upgrades what's been appropriated for appropriated for dam safety upgrades. So yes, we'd appreciate your support. Anytime you happen to be chatting with the local legislator, just a casual mention would be great.
I think we're going to see more and more of these. A lot of these dams were built in the past. Not a lot of new ones being built.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see, because of age, a lot of the outlet structures and other things on these are going to. The Jones Reservoir, which is on the list,
Yep.
I actually did some of the work up on that for the county, and that was a private-owned reservoir, and it was on a limited fill for 20-something years.
Right.
Because there was no money. And until it got put into the Twin Creek Special Service District, which then was able to distribute the liability through the district, they could not even look at fixing it. So I think this is a great approach that you're proposing.
Mr. Chair, just a quickie. Ben, maybe you can do a little homework on this, but I've been just sitting here thinking, Rolfson Reservoir, while physically it may be geographically in Sanpete County, it's tributary to Huntington Creek. It's used by Huntington Cleveland Irrigation Company in Emery County. Sanpete County commissioners would want nothing to do with participating in something for Emery County. I believe the politics aren't quite there.
I'm not looking for added layers of difficulty.
So I think that maybe when you start talking with that, my recollection is Rolfson Reservoir is tributary and used by down in Huntington, and so that would be Dana.
Thank you.
I see.
Way to shuffle that. That was awesome.
I will say that, I mean, at least in the smaller counties, I think that it might be an easier sell. That's, when half the time the people who are on the irrigation company board are commissioners. And I mean, I think it's in littler places, it would be easier to get that support. I know that Grand County, I mean, not from the liability standpoint and anything else, but we will sponsor applications for the CDBG grants for local nonprofits to be a government sponsor for them. And we try to help each other out because the money's sparse in our neck of the woods. So Salt Lake, I have no idea, but in the littler counties, it might not be as hard of a sell. And the high hazard dam thing, are these ones chosen because they fit the criteria to get these grants, or why are we? There's a million of them on the list. Why are we picking the 3 that happen to be these?
Right. So yeah, these 3 dams are not the only dams that are being funded or that we're trying to get funded. These are just the 3 that are needing a sponsor. But yeah,
can they go on this list and then we take ones that are government-owned dams and put them on the other list? Is it that stupidly not going to work?
All of the dams that we have picked out, we didn't. Yes, they had a number of eligibility criteria that we sorted them through, and then we had a whole process that we had to go through in order to pick these dams for award. So that's why they're on the list. And part of that process was assessing the dams through the state engineer's office for their structural condition.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so my mind's doing weird things here, but it's a pretty big list. So if we excluded these privately owned dams off of that and we're able to get the FEMA funding to participate on the other list, which has public entities that, most of them have public entities that own them, technically that frees up money.
Yeah.
That could then go back to help these that are private. So I know that's a switch in dollars, but
yeah, the issue is that the application period is already closed, and so we can't add new projects to the list, if that makes sense. We submitted I think 12 or 13 projects originally to FEMA, and we can't add to that list at this point, unfortunately.
Can we take off of the list, though?
Well, we can, but I mean, essentially, any money that we cannot spend is going to go back to the money hole, wherever it came from. So, you know,
I guess, but my point is, if you're using FEMA money instead of state money, then there's additional state money that maybe we could then go back to some of these projects if we can't get the support that we need from FEMA.
Will you repeat that?
So if off the list of the 12 or 15, I can't remember what you said, but if we only had the ones that would qualify for the FEMA dollars, that then frees up state monies that would have been used on those projects.
Right.
That we could maybe divert to the dams that won't qualify for FEMA money. I'm just trying to look at what a switch could be.
We're already funding these projects. We got $7.3 million, but at this point, we're not going to be able to spend all of it. We simply don't have the projects to spend all of it. And so any money that we don't, like if we were to take these projects off the list, that would just be money not spent and money lost. We can't redirect.
We can't use it on, we don't have enough projects to utilize that without these projects.
Right.
Gotcha.
So we can't be inventing this wheel, right? So somebody may have already done this, and we might be able to come up with a existing contractor MOU to bring to the table.
We're basically inventing the wheel at this point.
So, and then the other thing I had, and this is no shade on you guys at all, if this funding comes up again and there's another application period, can we not put these people on the list?
We can, but
I mean, it seems like our list is huge, so we have plenty to pick from, right?
Yeah, the list of eligible dams was dozens. In the future, if there is a future grant cycle, there may not be. Right. There's very high likelihood there will not be a future grant cycle for this grant. But in the future, if there is a future grant cycle, we would start picking these projects out much sooner. And we make improvement. I make improvements every time.
Yeah, no, again, stuff happens. I'm not, no shade, but it seems like a unnecessary
You're right.
For the counties.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Tom and Shalane. We just have two quick items for you. One, I've asked Sarah Schechter, our AG, to provide a legal update.
Sorry, I know I'm sitting between you guys and lunch, but I just wanted to introduce my two colleagues, Elle Angelo and Josie Lipton. We, in the AG's office, who represents the division or the Department of Natural Resources, are really lucky. We have a special program where we get to hire fellows for the summer dedicated to the department, and then they come and work for us for 2 years representing you and the other divisions within the department. And so we are lucky to have them and their assistants. So I wanted to introduce them. The first thing I wanted to talk about, of course now I can't find the notes, there we go. I sent you a fact sheet on the recent decision from the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment versus Department of Natural Resources about a month ago. The court issued that ruling on March 27th, and I just wanted to quickly cover what that ruling means and where we're going from here. And of course, I won't be discussing legal strategy, but just sort of an update of the litigation. The first thing, so the court's ruling was extensive and long, and I did send that to you if you want some bedtime reading. But it has two main components that I think are particularly important. The first is that the court held that Utah's public trust includes the navigable waters of the Great Salt Lake, so not just the beds, but also the actual waters within the lake. She did not extend that trust upstream. She said that the court ruled that the waters within the Great Salt Lake are subject to the public trust. The other really important element of that ruling is that she did dismiss the complaint as far as the plaintiff's request to modify upstream diversions. She said the court cannot order the state to curtail upstream diversions under the prior appropriation system, which means that one of the more critical aspects of the complaint was ruled in the state's favor. And that's good news, I think, for upstream water users. The court then also says that further litigation is needed to develop the exact parameters of the state's trustee duties. I'm looking at Commissioner Steed. And so ongoing litigation will continue. We have a July 9th deadline to file an answer to the complaint, which we're working on with our fellow agencies, so water rights, wildlife, state parks, forestry, fire, and state lands, and then, of course, the umbrella DNR. And once we file the answer, then we'll commence discovery, and that could be a pretty extensive process. I think really also critical to this particular body is that the court raised the fact that planning is a critical element of the public trust. And so while the original complaint was directed toward water rights, we know that water resources is charged with planning for our state's water resources. And so I think that the division and the board are now implicated even further in this litigation based on that. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yay.
Mr. Chair, I just had one question. Are there other bodies of water in the state of Utah that would be considered under this public trust?
Very possibly a lot of bodies of water. I mean, we've got Utah Lake, of course, but we don't know the implications yet for our running streams. So, of course, portions of the Colorado are navigable. The Weber has been adjudicated navigable. They're working on a lawsuit right now in the Provo River. So it has potentially broad-reaching implications. We just don't know what those are yet. And I think that will be the subject of further ongoing litigation well into the future. So
I was thinking Bear Lake specifically.
Bear Lake, yes, of course. Yeah.
Which seems like competing interests between the two.
Yes.
And Utah Lake as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Yeah. So with that, I think we can blame Commissioner Steed for all our problems.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Just teasing. I think the Commissioner's Office and the Division of Water Resources are going to work very closely together to make sure that we get what we need for the lake. The next item, if there are no more questions on that particular litigation, wanted to update you very briefly on the water horse litigation. There was oral argument before the Supreme Court on, I think it was April 7th. The justices had lots and lots of questions for both sides. I think that I have a good feeling about that litigation, but we'll see where it goes. And I have fingers crossed for a good outcome on that one. I don't expect that we might get an opinion before July, but I highly doubt it. The way that the court rules is pretty slow. They've got a lot of work to do. And then the last item is the Green River Block. The Colorado River Authority is engaged in the demand management pilot program. There is one project that involves Green River Block water rights. So we're working with the authority on getting a contract for that particular user to pay the fees that are associated with the Green River Block project. Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. And then one last thing, we have Michael Sanchez all set up to take board photos. So I think, Brian, maybe you? So you have a matching photo for upstairs, and anyone else who wants a new photo. So, do you want to come up here?
So I do have Brian's photo. We're switching the background, so I will need everyone else's photo. So if you all are available, I would take you. Yes.
I misunderstood
I didn't have my hair done.
And not totally necessary, but I want to match the background. So if you guys are available right after this meeting, I'll walk you down over there. It's just upstairs, second floor.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Is there anything else for discussion for the briefing meeting? Seeing none, we stand adjourned until 1 p.m.